See, I believe that leadership happens at every level. And the discussion I want to have with you today is that all of us in this room at one point or another are leaders. All of us are followers. And the discernment to know when is important. And how to be a leader. And what works and what doesn't work. It takes years. But our community is counting on us right here. These 30 graduates of this great program, which, by the way, just a second before we started the official program, they said they don't want to graduate, they want to keep having the meetings. I'm not sure if that's possible or not, but I think that speaks to the kind of bonds in this program, what they're doing. So, to leadership, St. Angelo, thank you for inviting me today. Your program is so important for fostering the next generation of leaders in our community. From the high school programs that you run, scholarships, and building that real foundational group of community leaders is so important. Special thanks to President Jennifer Boyd and the entire board for the gracious invitation, and to all the members of the Chamber of Commerce. Thank you for what you do for this community. Thank you for what you provide for this community. You have some great leaders, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here. So as you finish this program today, I want us to think about how each of us can impact our own jobs, our community, our families. And I want us to ponder a few questions today. What is the definition of leadership? How do we identify leaders? And who can be a leader? I think we've all heard the question, are leaders born or are they made? If you were to think of some common characteristics or go on Google, try to categorize leadership, I think what you might find is integrity, honesty, fairness, discipline, servanthood, passionate, humble, inspirational, creative, accountable. All of these terms, you're going to find those probably right here. Each of those terms describes these folks and many throughout the room. My main question for this room today, however, is leadership a position or is it a lifestyle? I started studying leadership 25 years ago this month, and I was dropped off at the U.S. Air Force Academy as an 18-year-old. My first experience studying leadership was a 19-year-old yelling at me, telling me that I was going to regret coming to this institution. He was right. I told my friends that too, and we thought he was right for at least the better part of a year. That might work, that type of leadership might work in the short term, but I don't think it works in the long term. I think most of us can agree to that. I believe true leadership involves influencing unlikely outcomes and then convincing others not only that it was worth it, but that they want to do it again. And the most poignant lessons I've learned throughout my military career involve my time as a fighter pilot. You're going to see me talk about hands here in a second, don't worry. You see, leadership in this business is truly the difference between life or death. And good leaders seem to always have a knack for being in the right place at the right time. But was it just luck? Or was there something to it? I want to tell you about my friend Dan. Dan is quiet, unassuming, usually blended in. You might not notice him in this room. He was a great fighter pilot. He was a master of his craft, and this is where I talk with my hand and show you the way we teach people to be fighter pilots. He was a master of the craft of being a fighter pilot. He worked hard, he was loyal, and he demonstrated all the characteristics that I previously talked about. They could all describe Dan. But Dan was not just a good leader. As a fighter squadron commander, Dan was a great leader. And why is that? Dan was devastatingly perceptive. He studied his environment. He He knew where he wanted our organization to go, and he set the expectations. He established a shared mental model for all of us to understand, and then he effectively communicated. I'd like to discuss three things that I believe allow good leaders to become great leaders. And everyone in this room, as I've previously said, is a leader. You can read lots of books. I haven't published a book yet, so let's take this for what it's worth. The minute you walk out of this room, you can discard this information. But in 25 years, I've tried to narrow it down to what it is that takes a good leader and makes them a great leader. And I believe that there is a certain foundation that good leaders share, and we've talked about some of those characteristics. But let's talk about those three things. First, I believe great leaders are thoughtful, yet they're decisive. That thoughtful, decisive balance can be summed up by saying that they are humble, credible, and approachable. They are thoughtful and they are decisive. Second, I believe great leaders are highly adaptable to their environments, their situations, the people that they're working with, those that they are trying to lead. And third, they have the ability, actually they have a burning desire to debrief. Not just the organization, but more importantly, themselves. So they're thoughtful and decisive, which is summed up as humble, credible, and approachable. They're highly adaptable. Leadership is not a position to them, it's a lifestyle. They're adaptable to the organization that they're in. And lastly, they want to debrief, they want to get better, they want to understand the things that went well, and more importantly, the things that didn't go well. So let's talk about this just a little bit. That first trait, thoughtfully decisive, well, what does this really mean? Some may be familiar with Top Gun, but what you're not familiar with is the real fighter weapons school in the Air Force. See, Top Gun's a Navy thing. So, as Air Force pilots, the real school is that what we call weapons instructor course. And what they teach there is they teach people who are already instructor pilots how to instruct other instructors. They teach people how to teach the business of being an instructor. And the core tenet of this is that you have to be humble, you have to be credible, and you have to be approachable. And in this axiom, I think that you learn how to be decisive, but they're always carrying that degree of humility with them. There's always a degree of humility. Some of these folks that graduate this course become 3- and 4-star generals. A lot of the folks that are here at Goodfellow have gone through this. See, this is not just for fighter pilots. Our entire Air Force uses this. Folks that are in the intelligence business go through weapons school, and they have the same characteristics. Folks who are top-notch maintainers that fix the airplanes, that know how to really produce air power, they do this. And these folks go on to be incredible leaders. See, Dan was like this. He was humble, but he was one of the very best. See, he was credible almost to a fault because nobody wanted to fly with him because he was so good. They just got beat up every time they did. But when he came back and he got on the ground, even though the people that he flew with and those that he was leading were in awe of his talents, you would never see him brag about it. The main difference was that he was approachable. His door was always open. So if you had an issue, you could go in and talk to him. And he was ready to hear you out. And here's the beauty about this with him. Folks knew that he was approachable, so they came to him. And guess what he was doing when they were coming to him with their issues? His perceptions were forming. He was studying the folks in his organization. He was learning what made them tick. He understood that the better that he knew the individuals in the squadron, the better he was going to be able to adapt to their situations. And his ability to read people was not just luck. It was hard work. It took a lot of time. I think that one of the most important things in the business of understanding your environment is to apply this loop, this feedback loop. I'm going to give you a tool here that we teach time and time again in the Air Force. Perception, decision, execution. As leaders, we want to understand what the situation is before we make a decision. Dan understood that, and he fully studied the environment that he was in, not just the people, but the surrounding environment. And his perception and gaining a grasp on what the reality was allowed him to then make a decision. And once he made a decision, the whole squadron was on the same page, and he communicated that. And then we could go forth, and we could conquer by taking action. These weren't random occurrences. And I'm going to come back to this feedback loop. Perception, decision, execution. I think you can apply this to any organization, small or large. From an informal leader in mid-management to the CEO of a major company. This loop, perception, decision, execution, is important. Before you make a decision, understand the environment. After you make the decision, execute it properly. We'll talk about this a little bit. Once a good leader really understands that environment, and importantly, the people that are in it, they can become great. And the great leaders that I've encountered throughout my career now move into this second and arguably most important trait, which is they're adaptable. And that they can employ a mixture of skills, and it depends on the situation, in order to be highly effective. Depending on the audience, depending on the task at hand, these leaders quickly assimilate into their surroundings, and they have a keen ability to really focus their organizations. Let me give you an example, a real-time example. In 2017, I was flying combat missions in Syria. We were having a heck of a problem. The conflict that we were in was against ISIS. And we were having a heck of a problem with the Russians, who were also flying in Syria, doing something completely different. Their goal was to support Assad in his civil war against the people that he had used chemical weapons against. That's what the Russian Air Force was doing. Our goal, on the other hand, was to make sure that we prevented the spread of ISIS, not only in Iraq, but also in Syria. And this was along the Euphrates River. We had a leader there, a general, a one-star general, who had gone through this course that I mentioned. And we had to figure out some way to adapt to the situation at hand. Because the Russians were flying right through the middle of where we were operating. So we're trying to have combat operations against ISIS. The Russians, meanwhile, are flying their aircraft very dangerously close. In fact, at one point in time, everybody knows what the E-3 AWACS is. It's got a big radar on the top. It's a 707 aircraft, a big aircraft, and it has early warning radar. And it basically controls the airspace, like being the quarterback for the battlefield. A Russian fighter jet flew within 50 feet at night in front of an E-3 AWACS with 50 people on board that AWACS. One Russian fighter pilot would have killed the entire crew, missed it by 50 feet. The jet wash from that aircraft, from the Russian fighter jet, knocked the radar offline for about an hour because of the turbulence. So our leader this general had to adapt to the scenario. He had to come up with a game plan. And it took him the better part of 2 months to convince the 3 and the 4-star generals of this issue and how the rules of engagement needed to change. But thank goodness he did. And the message that we were able to deliver to the Russians, well, not only did it get him sanctioned, this 1-star general, he joked, he said, well, I guess I'm not going to Russia for any sort of vacation time. Thank goodness he took that standard, he adapted to the environment. He listened to those of us who were flying those missions, to the people on the ground, to the issues at hand. See, he was visionary. Adaptable leaders are visionary. They see the organization not as it currently is, but as it should be in the future. Dan was that kind of fighter squadron commander. He was a visionary who got us on the same page. He had a unique ability to communicate a moonshot vision, putting a man on the moon, kind of a vision to us, adapted to the scenario, and got the squadron moving in the right direction. And the second trait of these adaptable leaders is that they know what style to use. They've mastered the art of coaching. And I think all of you right here, in whatever organization you're in, being adaptable, going to a small organization or a large organization, reading the people, understanding what the perception is, and having the ability to be a coach when you need to, and then having the respect from the organization because you're credible at what you do, because you're approachable every single day. If you have to be firm, then there's times for that. And then the standard never drops. That's what great leaders do. They know when to switch from that coaching method to that firm method. And they have the ability to seamlessly transition, and nobody even knows the difference. Because you are humble, you are approachable, you are credible. The toolkit that you have, you use that last one with restraint, obviously. You want to inspire people. Go back to that category, that list of characteristics that we had. Every one of you have all of those characteristics. But I think what we learn in life is those are good leaders. The great leaders then transition into the ability to switch to their surroundings, to perceive it accurately. And let's talk about the last characteristic. The desire to debrief. What does this mean, debrief? Man, this guy's up here talking fighter pilot stories. He just wants to go back and fly and do combat missions. Well, that is kind of true. I wish I could do that, but debriefing really just means, very simply, taking time to look inward at the organization, to look inward as a person, and just be honest. Just be honest about the situation. I never flew a perfect mission. In 2,000 missions, I never flew a perfect mission. And every time we came back and sat down and we painstakingly went through the details of these missions. You know, that mission that I told you with that AWACS that almost had the mid-air collision with the Russian fighter jet, I guarantee you there was a debrief there. Who knew the information? Did we know that this aircraft was out there flying? Could we have seen it early? Even though it was the Russian fighter pilot's fault, what could they have done to avoid the situation? If anything. It means taking a critical look at each situation and analyzing what could have been done better and what can be changed in the future. We want to celebrate our successes. We should celebrate our successes. We should take the time to debrief our successes. But I think when we go back to that perception, execution, decision, execution loop, this is where great leaders succeed. I've heard that only 10% or less of Fortune 500 CEOs can take a strategy, something that's way up here, and actually bring it down and communicate a task. And I think the key is not communicating that task. The key is communicating, here's what we've been doing right. Here are the things that we can improve upon. And setting those expectations. I'm going to give you one more flying story. I feel like 45 minutes is running out. Right after Bashar al-Assad used chemical weapons on his own people, we set an area that was a no-fly zone along the Euphrates River. And we told the Syrians and the Russians with a hotline, we expected them to stay south of the river. two aircraft flying in Syria. Myself, and my wingman, who was a 25-year-old brand new wingman. And so we briefed this mission, and we knew we were going to have some bad weather. And in fact, it was. And I told him, I said, these are the kind of things that you and I need to be clear on what our mission is. We need to be clear on what the rules of engagement are. So we get there, and we're protecting this airspace, making sure that we're holding ISIS accountable, and also the subsequent mission, because of the chemical weapons used, had to do with Syria. Well, the weather was terrible from 10,000 feet all the way up to 40,000 feet. It was so bad that the tankers that we refueled on had to position themselves miles, hundreds of miles away from our operating area. And at the time that I had to go get fuel, my wingman was basically out there for about 10 minutes by himself. And he calls me on the radio and he said, I have a contact with an unknown aircraft, and it looks like it might be headed north of the river. Now, you want to talk about your heart starting to pound. Bad weather, I'm now on the tanker getting fuel that I have to have. I can't just go back. And a 25-year-old brand new wingman is alone and unafraid in Syria. Stakes are pretty high. The difference here was whether or not this aircraft that he saw was going to be a hostile aircraft to be shot down or not. Was it going to go north of the river or not? Well, things ended fairly well. The decisions were made in the right way, but it wasn't without incident. It wasn't without external actors that didn't see the whole picture, telling this wingman what to do, directing our flight, telling us where we should be. And thank goodness we had the ability to come back and debrief that. We didn't have an aircraft shot down. We were able to hold the rules of engagement as they were. And we were able to come back to fly another day and not have an international incident. So I would encourage all of you to use some model like this and to go back to the decisions that were made, but to get the facts on the table from what your perception was, and then to look in the mirror, tell the truth, and be honest. And it's easy for us to point fingers, but the most important thing that I learned was usually as a leader, the fault generally comes from us as leaders. And those of us who are willing to admit that, your credibility in your organization, amongst your peers, and where you serve, will only increase. And what you'll find in your organization is that the esprit de corps, the people know that you're willing to tell the truth about your own performance. The esprit de corps will skyrocket. So let me wrap up by saying congratulations to all of you, and thank you for what you do for this community. Thank you for being a leader in this community. And I don't think that leadership is a position. I think it's a lifestyle. I think it's something that each of us does every single day in motivating folks to do something that may seem unlikely, but then doing it so well, I'm giving you some tools that have personally worked and that I've seen in people like Dan, who have inspired organizations, but they work so well that people want to come back and do it again. So I congratulate you. I thank the entire room for being here to celebrate their success, to celebrate a new group of leaders who's going to go into the community with a renewed vigor, and a call to action. A call to action to show the rest of the Concho Valley and San Angelo that this is how we, the community, want to be seen, and this is what's important to us. So, to Leadership San Angelo, thank you for having me here. Jennifer, I appreciate the invitation. Congratulations to each of you. I look forward to serving with you.